hello. We are back for another episode of The Way of the Blade. This is going to be part 6, and it's really going to be kind of a continuation of part 5. It's going to be another part to that one, because I frankly need to make sure to try to give you all a chance to take in some of this information without just always making you drink from the fire hose of the many, many chasms in my mind. But today you can expect me to talk about all kinds of things that are going to make some of you moderately to most extremely uncomfortable, because I'm going to talk about how blades like these and some of the decisions we make with them, or blades like these and some of the other decisions we make with them, have lasting and perpetual ramifications for the rest of our life. And if we don't actually talk about that and what it takes to get cured from the cost, it's totally worthless for us to ever press forward in talking about how to use even these knives for making little fires and wonderful things. It's still important we address each of these areas, because if I was to just send you into the mist and into the fog of war without giving you a crash course on the cost as well as the cure for perpetual radical intelligent evil or waging a war against the darkness, if we didn't talk about that, you'd be basically cannon fodder. And that's how a lot of people out there like people to be. They like people to not actually be aware of the realities of what it is they're about to press into. But to the best of our ability, I seek to prepare you for a chance to engage that no matter the cost, because the cost for me has been a lifetime's worth. As in, it's still something I perpetually have to wrestle with, not necessarily every day, but a lot more days than I'm naturally comfortable admitting. It's got a mark that is very, very, very hard to completely absolve yourself from. And the practical reality is, because there's things like anniversaries, there's days that are forever seared into your conscious mind so vividly that they never fade. And I know there's perspectives out there for folks that, you can just ask the Father to take these things out of your mind and other stuff. But there's certain events that have happened in my life, or things that I've done or was made to be a part of, that are so vividly intense, and I don't ever not want them to be remembered, because I operated for way too long in my life in a world where secrets were currency, where information was one of the most potent tools that you had, and learning to keep a secret was vital for a mission, or one of the most critical ways that we maintained the family's cause. And I had to come to a decision in my life where I had to choose whether or not I was going to continue to operate in a land of secrets, or if I instead would come out and renounce, and not only that, but expose all of the secrets I possibly could. And for me, the secrets that nobody really warned me about when I signed my way into the United States military or also when I signed my life up to go into the mental health field and becoming trained as a psychologist and wading myself into residential facilities and psych wards and all of the rest of that kind of whole other Hollywood-esque style of mental health care that takes place in the United States. All of my life, I've been dropped into situations like that I was not adequately trained and equipped to handle. The schooling that I got in for psychology didn't even remotely actually teach me almost anything I needed in order to be effective in that field. And basically the same held true for a huge amount of the information that I was taught in the United States military. They don't actually tell you they teach you very, very wonderfully well how to turn off the emotional centers of your brain to just access that base level that base level reaction. Remember, we were talking about how in life and death situations, or fight or flight and panic or freeze modes, we have these reactions that are just conditioned into us. So the military had a way of conditioning the mind to work with the body, even if the higher processes of cognition shut down. So that's a lot of systematic desensitization. So they're going to expose you or allow an incredible amount of those situations to the best of their ability to mimic what those situations might induce in you. But really, they just do good old-fashioned mind control. Basic combat training, if you've been through it, you've genuinely been through mind control. Absolutely. Sleep deprivation, food deprivation, substance deprivation, hostile environments. I mean, it's a literal recipe for taking a human normal dudette, and turning them into a trained killer, murderer, manslayer, for all intents and purposes, or being capable of doing that, which is still just turning them into, here at the base programmed level, a manslayer. And there's a lot of natural systems that were built into us that resist violence, that resist the act of slaying another human being. There's one of the best authors you could ever read. If you really want to dive into a much deeper breakdown of this, there's a book called On Killing. And I do not have the name of the author with me or in my mind. So he was a colonel. Anyways, gentlemen in the United States military who also looked through statistical analysis of battlefield data, as well as firsthand, secondhand reporting, or even archaeological evidence to try to verify how much resistance that is naturally within man to slay another man, and how that resistance actually increases as you get closer towards the individual. So it's like the intimacy factor is very real. There is an intimacy about killing because you're taking of a life, rather than a sexual act where you're creating a life, or it should, at the end of it, be able to produce life. Taking of a life has natural resistance factors built into us. There's going to be a lot of argument and discourse for people that are going to talk about sociopathic or psychopathic tendencies that are conditioned into people, or are genetically ingrained into people through generational sins, iniquity, the curses of their fathers, their ancestors. Everybody in their family's just always done that. Those resistance factors can be mitigated or trained out. And because of that, when individuals are going to be going through a coursework or going into a place where they need to condition themselves to try to be ready to make a decision to defend another individual with this from somebody else, for, say, let's just imagine that being a problem, it's going to be a serious problem, because getting this close and personal with someone versus using a firearm is a big difference. Even more so for, say, an artilleryman who pulls on a string or does the calculation, or is a mortarman who's dropping the round into the tube. A pilot who's 50,000 feet coming down, dropping into kind of a more operational altitude and letting go of some munitions. Or a drone operator who's sitting playing a video game that costs people real lives. These all have distance factors that are touching into that bubble that each of us have, a natural bubble to resist pressing through and then popping and stealing of someone's life. It's documented and known that throughout time, we can see soldiers or people that go through onto, say, a battlefield. A great example that he cited in the book was talking about Civil War battles. And the archaeologists that were digging up and unearthing rifles were noticing that's I don't know the exact percentage, but some of you can look it up and let me know. But a fair percentage of the individuals on the battlefield just perpetually reloaded their rifles, never firing. Just perpetually went through those motions, those actions that had been preconditioned into them during their training. So when you're in that fight, flight, or panic mode set or freeze mindset, you have those actions that have been conditioned into you are just going to happen. They literally will get on a loop. Like people will call, there's different kind of loops and tracks that you can get onto in a defensive situation or in a situation where violence is taking place. Like one of them, a loop you're trying to discipline your mind to use might be something like an OODA loop, OODA, OODA loop, which is observe, orient, decide, and act. That's trying to break yourself out or move yourself into a more precise mechanism for making a decision, trying to make your OODA loop faster than the other individuals, that kind of stuff. We're going to get into a lot of that when we go into combative mindsets, but those actions that happen in your brain are always affected by your exposure to previous situations that might be similar to this, as well as the conditioning that's gone in ahead of time. So individuals who go into combat start being trained or maybe going to combat training are going to go through what's called a battery of arms. Battery of arms is a use in how to basically effectively operate the tool that you have been given in a given situation. For most modern combat soldiers or law enforcement agencies or special weapons and tactics teams, this is generally going to be a rifle or a handgun or breaching tools, explosive devices. There's battery of arms, but predominantly it's in regards to using a rifle. Soldiers that are trained to carry around their rifles, you see them marching and all the rest of this and going through different holds on their rifle and positioning it on their body or around their body. All of that is done because you're encoding into the body a way of using that, even if you haven't slept seriously in 3 or 4 days. And the last time you can remember drinking water that wasn't completely tainted with piss, it's been a month. It's that reality. When you're in deep, what they call like fatigue syndromes, where your body has actually developed syndromes and diseases because you are so fatigued, combat fatigue, guys who are staying in that active, constant, stressed out, needing to survive, sleeping with one eye open, not really ever sleeping, but always noise, explosion, just like the battle rattle of life that's happening in those situations. When you're in that for so long, all of these normal mechanisms in your body and your mind and your soul, they just diminish. They go down to a base survival level. And when you're in that for long periods of time, all that begins to really kind of take ownership or unction in your body is the stuff that was conditioned into it. So a battery of arms is there to teach you how to maintain working hands on your weapon, never to drop the weapon. How many times you're taught to never drop your weapon, never drop your weapon? It's because when you're in that state and you're shaking like this constantly, like you're going to shake so violently, it's so hard to even start to express the amount of tremors that take over your body. The teeth chattering, the hands ice cold, the vision narrowing, the deeper loss of your sensory abilities in your hearing, your taste, the saliva dries up in your mouth. All these factors start to take place. But if you've conditioned your body to act in such a way that it does not ever drop its rifle, that it is going to grab a magazine, that it is going to lock the bolt to the rear and let go of the charging handle and make sure to press the forward assist, whatever battery of arms you were trained on for whatever platform you use, all of that's there so that when you're in that situation, you will actually perform that task and fire towards the enemy. The big thing they notice, though, if you actually look into data, is how often people don't shoot. Or if they do shoot, they intentionally miss. As in, they very intentionally don't shoot the other guy who's 50 feet away or 50 yards away. I know most people's Civil War battlefield mindset comes from Hollywood and other garbage. We don't really know exactly how they operated on those battlefields in the same way that the movies or the historians would like to elude you to believe. There's a lot that's happening up here in a soldier's mind when they're actually sitting there in the suck of war. And it's stuff that they generally don't ever talk about again for one moment the rest of their life. Because it's so hard to possibly comprehend, first of all, what you went through, let alone what the other people went through, let alone just realizing that I'm shooting people over fashion choices. Think about that. We murder people for fashion choices because, John woke up today and put on an outfit that had these colors on it, but not my colors on it. Or he put a Velcro sticker on his arm, so I shot him in the throat. That's fashion. That's wholesale murder for fashion choices. That's what you do. That's basically war. And there's a lot of resistance to that. And if people in that situation aimed up on purpose because they didn't actually want to shoot that guy, because it's a lot harder to do that when you're looking somebody in the face and you see they're a human, or suddenly you notice like the guy's got food in his beard. Like you notice these weird things or situations, or you see a wedding ring or a necklace that he's wearing or something just arrests your attention in that moment, and you suddenly have a resistance to murdering another human being. That's normal. That's really normal. It doesn't mean that it's always going to happen, but sometimes that happens. And so they discovered in a lot of these battlefield situations that soldiers don't actually aim to kill. They often don't even aim to hit their targets. They intentionally aim away, or they won't even fire at all. They will not fire in any capacity. They won't pull the trigger. There's a resistance there, and for a lot of people, that resistance factor is a safeguard. There's a safeguard because some of you who may have an unction in your life to be a defender, to be a protector, to be a hero, to be the warrior on the wall. All of those aren't wrong things. They're attributes of justice. And I firmly believe we serve the God of justice. I am eagerly awaiting the day that the rider on the white horse comes and destroys the radical intelligent evil that has taken root on this earth and has come down upon us, and the dragon who seeks to kill, steal, and devour all the good in this world. He is going to set it right. He's going to tread them down until the blood of their bodies is like water soaking his robe. He is a warrior. So too were many of those men that he raised up and women that he raised up. It is a very critical function and a part of the body that cannot be deprived and starved nor compartmentalized and locked away in the corner where we just don't talk about it anymore because it was so bad we don't want to touch it again. But if you keep silent, it will destroy you. If you are a coward and you watched other people die because you were a coward, it's not wrong. You didn't make the wrong decision. You're alive. You're alive. Other people may be dead because of choices you made or actions you didn't take, or you may just believe those things and they may just be outright lies. But regardless, most of people have just locked up those moments so intensely that they have no outlet, and instead it just shoots off in all these other directions in your life and ruins the people around you. It ruins your future. It steals from you the death that you should have taken or you didn't take, or the ones that are being taken all around you. Death is vicious. And it has ripples that just echo through your life. They nearly ruined me. I wrote a book. If you didn't know, I wrote a book. It's called Snatched from the Flames. Chapter 1 is dealing with that, those ripples. To the end, I'm dealing with those ripples and wrestling with why I avoided them for so long in my life. How I hid them, how I ran away from them, how I systematically found ways to try to forget the garbage and the hatred and the rage that was so ingrained into me, how I just never wanted to deal with it ever again the rest of my life. And then God opened my wife's womb and we conceived a child. And I shouldn't, first of all, ever have had a chance to live past a few years of age, let alone into my young teen years. I never even thought it was remotely going to happen that I would survive till 18 years old. I didn't even comprehend in my head. I watched so much death happen in my life that I assumed it was inevitable that I would be dead by the time all the good stuff in life could start happening, or I ever got a chance to be free. I never once believed that there was future waiting there. I hoped, I had dreams, I had aspirations, but I snuffed out lives like with rapidity because I believed I was being a bearer of justice. I believed people were telling me the truth. That was a mistake. I was manipulated. And yet I bear the consequences of that, and I've borne the consequences of that, and I stuffed all those things away, but I couldn't be free. And then I always desired that freedom. I desired to escape that. I found ways of coping and surviving that weren't destructive. For me, that was escaping into nature. For me, that was finding peace amidst the storms. I needed nature to help me know that the Creator didn't just create me or the world for death. I had a fatalistic flaw. I had a flaw that fatally wounded me. I didn't know better when I made some of those decisions in my life. I found it to be far easier to pop those bubbles of other people and to collapse that distance of killing and the intimacy of killing down to blades. Blades are one of the most intimate ways to kill another human beings. Soldiers for a long time have only ever used blades. Arrows from rock, from flint, from stone that you find out of the earth, and fashioning it to a stick and making a spear to shove inside another guy's abdomen. That's been going on from the beginning, from Cain on. And because of that, those ripples are constantly echoing through people's lives. They're echoing through mine. But I found that if I went into nature, I found places and ways to get healed that gave me peace amidst the storm. They settled my mind down enough that I could remove some of those doors and channels and locks that had always held back that flood of emotions that was there. Because those emotions that you think aren't happening because you go through a fight or flight situation, or maybe you blacked out right before the car hit you, but then you came to consciousness right after it. Your mind and your body still went through all of it. They did. Your soul too, your spirit too. Some aspects of you didn't. But that doesn't mean that those emotions, those feelings, those sensations, the body memories aren't still lingering there. And there's just a flood of it waiting to come pouring out. And I prayed constantly. My deep prayer was that God would allow me to come to remembrance and to remember anything I needed to remember in order to be healed. But that he would buffer the emotions to allow me to come to grips with the truth without further trauma. And I still pray that. I pray that for anybody, especially doing any type of ministering or counseling to people. I always ask them and encourage them to pray the same thing. There may be sensations and experiences of that act of violence that took place that you do not necessarily need to remember in order to be healed or to be made whole. But there's a lot of it you probably do. And much of that had to do for me was with the silence, was being silent, absolutely silent from the beginning to the end of it. I was very good because I was very quiet. Like, it makes a big difference. If you're a little bit noisy at all, you die, or you're exposed, or the entire operation deteriorates so rapidly and lots of people's lives are suddenly at stake. There's a sound factor that is so pivotal to an act of violence that you try to shut it off almost. You try to shut off your ability to make sound. And so I really struggled for a long time to ever have the ability to speak, let alone utter these things to just out loud to God, to even remotely pray to Yahweh and ask him, what do you think of these things in my life? What does this mean to you? It took me a long time to ever get there. It took me longer still to write it down. It took me longer still to ever speak it to someone I loved and trusted, my wife, to then let alone ever speak it to anybody else, let alone to get to a place of publishing like my worst nightmare into words, and then to go through and read the audio of that. All of these things were so critically important for me, but they were some of the most unbearable things that I ever went through in my life. They were some of the hardest things I've ever done, was to speak, was to just physically speak it out. And there's a lot of people that have gone through those moments in their life that they've just kept so silent and locked up. And you need to speak it out. You need to confess the secrets. You need to admit the fact that you pissed and crapped yourself in that moment and you didn't do anything and people around you got hurt, and while they were getting hurt and you were watching them getting hurt, and while you were holding the gun and you could have done something, you didn't. Those things happen a lot. And you need to talk about it. Or you walk down an alley and you chose to go left down an alley that you'd been down a lot of times. And because of that, some freaking pervert and predator hunted you. And it stole from you your innocence, or it ruined from you the opportunity to ever think you had innocence left in your body because you went to a party and let somebody take advantage of your mind, will, and emotions or body and destroy you. They were evil. You were not. Sometimes we were evil. Sometimes we were the harbingers of death. Sometimes we served the reaper. And we regret that later on in life when we come to realize how jacked up it really was. Or we regret that we didn't do something differently. And if you don't deal with those things, if you don't speak them, if you don't confess them, you die. You die. And while you're dying, you take down everybody with you. Do you understand? You're like the man who had many talents. You're the woman who had an enormous treasure trove of opportunities and giftings and abilities and passions and loves and dreams and aspirations and callings, and they are wanting now. They're shattered because they've been stolen by death. They've been stolen by murder, by hatred, by bitterness, by unforgiveness. If you let them, they will destroy you unto your death. But if you will let him who is able bring healing to your life. If you actually read this every day, if you developed a spiritual discipline in your life, the same way you were disciplined maybe to get up every day and do your PT, to get up every day and to do your training, to get up every single day and put on the right clothing, the right socks, the right shoes, the right underwear, the right pants, the right undershirt, the belt, the tool in the exact right place, the extra reload in the place, your tourniquet, all those disciplines some of you have so diligently done for so many years of your life. For the first time you saw that amazing advertisement of a police officer and he looked like a hero, or you saw him in parades and everyone's cheering, "You're our heroes," until they hate you and cuss you out and spit in your face when you're giving them a ticket, or you're trying to enforce a law against a domestic violence situation and someone shoots you and you've got a freaking crap in a bag the rest of your life. Nobody cheers for you then. Nobody comes and lines up at your door. Nobody pays your mortgage and pays your taxes off and makes sure you never have to worry about monetary needs the rest of your life. It's a lie so many of us were sold, and we sacrificed our lives for it. And that sucks, and it's awful. But you know what? We got to address it, and so we can get restoration and move forward and be effective again. Because there's this kingdom war perpetually being waged for the souls and the minds of men and women and children all over this earth. And some of you have the best training that was ever been given to a man or a woman to equip them to go out and make a difference, to be a strategic response team in human trafficking situations, or to go and actually be doing other kind of work to uncover digital closets and find out what kind of dirty, nasty skeletons are buried in people of power's playbooks. You have all kinds of skills that are in there, but so many of them, for many of you, are locked up in those same compartments that you used to bury all your bitterness, to bury all the bloodshed, to bury everything away in. But if you can get healing into those areas, you can get redeemed. Redeemed. If you understand, you can have the worst moment of your life, the absolute worst moment of your life, turned into the most powerful, beneficial, life-giving thing that's ever happened to you or to the people that you are then allowed to be a service to. It can change you. It can transform you. It can renew you. And that is one of the most incredible things. Those soldiers who had a resistance to aim into another man's chest and to shoot him, instead aimed high, or they aimed low, or they just reloaded their rifle. Well, in modern combat, in modern wargaming, in all of the ways they've weaponized the Black Mirror, these screens and the sounds and the microphones and this sorcery technology that we're all infected with, they perfected and honed that process to such an extent now that people are much more capable and readily able to press the trigger and make a decision to end other people's lives than ever before. And the intimacy of that killing bears great consequences, just the same as it would have done for a guy from 150 years ago or 1,500 years ago. There is a cost and a consequence to these things in our life. It is so vital that we learn the ways that we can get healed. And so with that being said, I wanted to share with you a way that he really did heal me. And because some of you kind of wonder why we do these, Nature Nate videos, and I talk about going seashelling or finding teeth or fossils and why all this stuff is so important to me. And that to me is one of the most powerful moments of my life. But the reason is because of these words. The reason is because I made a decision to speak. I made a decision to not let myself die, to not let my daughter, my newborn daughter, be raised in a house with a monster like I was. I didn't want my child to be sold off into that way of living or into the generational bondage that I was raised in. I wanted her to have hope. I wanted her to be free. I wanted her to be free the day she was conceived, the day she was born, from there on out. I didn't want it to be, once I'm 18, I'll be free. Once I get that job, I'll be free. Once I'm finally married to that girl, I'll be free. I didn't want any more of that. I didn't want to put those sins on her. I wanted to wage war with the man in the mirror. I wanted to fight the hatred that I had for who I was. I wanted to know why I was the way I was. So I waged that war regularly. I fought fiercely. I wrote things in this book that I wish I'd never had to write down, but I did because I love her.
And I love her so much. And I love the fact that I have a chance to see her. I get to see her wake up. I get to see her first time that she ever took food into her mouth. I get to see her walk. I'm alive and I get to see my children grow, and that's a miracle. My best friends weren't. They died. It's awful. It ought not to be this way. I talked to their widows. They don't have children. But I do. And I want her to be free. I want to love my wife sincerely. Like I sincerely want to love my wife. I want to love again. I want to have hope again. I want to have courage again. And the way I did that was by pouring it out. Was by writing it out. I really think you have to write these things out. You have to let it not just stay up in here anymore, because it's killing you. And it'll kill these people around you. And you shouldn't be, God is not willing that any should perish. So guard your home, even if it's from yourself. I had to go off into the woods to do that. I needed to scream as loud as I've ever screamed in my entire life, because that silence was finally broken. I finally got freedom from that silence. And I wanted to let it all out. And this was the way I did it. These were the ways I found to get it out, was to go crawl out in nature and write these things down or speak them out. So that's what I did. And I'm going to read you something. And I'm going to tell you why. Because he alone can orchestrate a life like mine into a path of redemption. And I'm just going to share with you why he is a great orchestrator. And no matter what level of killing you've been a part of, or killing that's been happened around you, or violence that's occurred, you can get redeemed. And your redemption story will be so powerful. It strikes fear into the heart of darkness. So I'm reading from my book. This is in chapter 12. And what this is going to talk about at page 77 and 78, but really page 79. I have a playlist of all this. If you want to hear the whole chapter, you can go there. But I'm just going to read a couple pages from this. But this is the side of me that had been silent for so many years of my life. This was the side of me that had always been locked up in those moments for me. This was the side of me that was silent and calculating and precise and capable of engaging in those moments. But this was the ramification of that. My God, the questions crushed my soul. I couldn't hear what my wife was saying. I was trying so hard to remember that I was no longer wrestling with death in the heat of that swampy district. I was desperately trying not to count the seconds it took for him to stop fighting. My God, did you hear the sounds of strangulation? Why didn't you stop me? My God, where are you? Where is your hope? How I wished I could tell Chelsea that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was just another man's killing machine, a soldier whose company's craft was at its finest. It's all I never knew. No one ever told me how to say no. So what do you tell your wife when she looks over at you and asks you, "Honey, are you okay?" Do you tell her that you were still staring at a man's eyes when he was bursting from the pressure of the cord you buried in his neck? Do you tell her you couldn't breathe when you saw the rearview mirror when you loaded your daughter into her car seat that week? Or do you stuff it all back into the boxes it was kept? No one ever gave me this information. It was not mission critical, but learning how many seconds it takes a femoral artery to bleed out a body when someone is fighting for their life was. Our instructors had us watch dozens of videos of it over and over again. Different sized people, men, women, children, different levels of fear, terror, and frenzy. We watched them all. We were trained how to keep quiet, even as they begged and screamed. They taught us how to turn off our hearing. The last vestiges of our conscience were seared by the irons of madness. No matter how many times we were trained not to hear them, their voices would come crawling back in the dark. In the stillness, they were there. We had to keep them quiet for so long, but the Father has told us that we don't have to anymore. We no longer have to keep the secrets of murder, misery, and madness. That week in September, we finally broke down and screamed in the car. We'd written about 7 more bodies that fell by our company-controlled hands. We drove away from the little cafe we'd been writing in and screamed until our throat grew hoarse. Our words were an incense of agony, ripe with the brutal honesty that I had stopped hiding from my healer. My God, do you hear us screaming? Did you hear the sound of that girl whose severed hands are on the floor next to the brute's feet? My God, what happened to the other boy, the one who was right by our side? That chosen one they are turning into another chameleon of death. Please set him free from the tortured tunnels of turmoil that he was locked in. Save him, Messiah, I beg you. There are so many of us out there, and who will tell us that we are forgiven? Who forgives children whose manipulated hands are stained with blood? Who will tell us no one has forgotten those screams, those pleas, and the plots of land where they buried and burned the bodies? My Father, I beg you, don't let it be wasted. Not a single utterance of agony that flowed from the bleeding lips of the many children, teens, and adults. I can't unsee the eyes of this man. Father, did you see them? Why did I have to get out of the car and not them? Will you forgive me? Please, I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't. No one gave me answers. Neither my commanders nor their superiors. No one told me why. Why them? Why him? Why this person and not that? Why did they need 3 vials of blood from his neck? Why did we have to shove the engraved copper ring on the fingers of the quiet man's body? Wet workers don't get answers. Just diamond-dusted wires, blades, bullets, or syringes of potassium and craftily engineered biological agents. Why can't I say I'm sorry to his widow? Will they kill me for what I've done? And out of the bellows of our broken heart came forth a cry of such raw intensity that it scattered the wounds. The wind and the waves are all I see. Abba, my Father, please save me. So what do you tell your wife when she sees you staring off for the 10th time that day? Do you tell her the screams of a little girl are ringing in your ears and you want to vomit? God, you heard those screams and the dying man's bulging eyes. I know this is true. I just want you not to forget them. Please don't waste them. Not a drop of blood or an utterance of agony. I surrender. I surrender them to you. And I can't carry them anymore. They're crushing my heart. Take it all. It's not mine to hold anymore. I lay it at your feet. I need you to pick me up because I don't feel like rising for a long time. I wish I could crawl into the dirt and hide from the hurt and the horror of my heart. I want to find peace when the storm rages. I pray you will build me a home of hope so I can hunker down for a while. Back on my bed, I suddenly realized I'd been lost in my head. My wife asked me for the 5th time, "Honey, are you okay?" She knows me too well to hide the horror dripping from my heart. I stammered through the strangulation cord, the blade on his shoulders, and the million questions pummeling my peace and stealing my sleep. She listened, her compassion unending. She bore with me in a moment of horror. The realization had become a hammer, driving the nails of understanding deeper and deeper into her once innocent soul. She wanted to run from it, to blink it all away, to try to rationalize the impossible madness of a man she'd known for years, being a controlled wolf who hunted strangers in the night. She thought of the long-haired man running shirtless through the waters in the ocean with glee. She thought of Nate and struggled to see me. My hands shook. The fear of rejection boiled my heart's waters to mist. The thoughts of running came pounding through my head. We can grab our bag and fade back into nothingness. We would be a ghost in the shadows and they'd never see us again. As if reading my thoughts, she grabbed my trembling hands and held them close. She knew our names of Jason, Nathan, and all the rest. She reached over and touched the blade strapped to my chest. It had been there for years, and now she knew why. We wanted to know she wouldn't be afraid of us, knowing what we had done. We wanted to know she would love us, even though we had killed, even though we had been made to be monsters before we knew there was any other way. And in a moment of exposure, she covered us with the same love, understanding, and kindness the Father had showed us time and time again. Chelsea became the healer's physical hands of love as she held on to me and refused to run away. She sobbed with us, telling us she loved us and would never be afraid of us no matter what we'd been through. She loves us all no matter what we did. Our woman of rescue chose not to flee, not to run, but instead Chelsea chose to abide. Those fears of rejection are blown away as we settle into a sense of peace we'd hardly ever known. I wanted to read that because I wrote this book. I wrote that chapter almost 4 years ago. And those are some of the hardest things to write. And some portions of this book were really hard to write, and you wouldn't expect it. Some were brutal. As I went through to edit this book, we put pictures in it. There's a picture here on the page where I'm reading from. And I don't know how well you'll be able to see this just through the book like that, but I'm standing in this ocean on a spot of an island, and in the background here is actually a huge bridge that crosses over to one of these islands in Florida. I published this book back in 2018. Chelsea and I, in 2014, had gone to Florida for a vacation in August. That's not a great decision. Really. We thought we could find oranges. We didn't know they grew in January, or they were ripe in December, January, and March. We went to orange orchards hoping to pick from an orchard and eat oranges. That was one of the things Chelsea had always wanted to do so badly. I wanted to find seashells more than anything ever and swim with manatees, see an alligator, catch a snapping turtle. Those were like the big things I wanted to do more than anything. Last year, Chelsea and I were talking about where we were going to go because we travel around in an RV, and I wanted to go to Florida for the next winter season. And so we started trying to find a place that we might be able to go to, and we really loved that area of Florida when we went there. It was called Sanibel Island, and it is kind of known as the seashelling capital of the world, and it earns its title from everywhere I've been.
in the world. It's definitely one of the best ever. And so we ended up finding a farm that we could go to that wasn't really close to that, but it was some place that we knew we could drive to. We could at least get to. It was like hours of driving, but it was worth it because I ended up literally spending almost every single week of my entire winter down on that island. And that is the exact spot where that picture was taken, was on Sanibel Island in front of a lighthouse that they have just off the edge of it. And I was standing there wrestling with those questions, and I ended up putting that picture on that page in the book because sometimes I still wrestle with those questions. Sometimes I still lose sleep. It's not like it all just goes away. I'd like to tell you there's just a cure for that horrible thing that happened to you that's just going to come, but it may not come in your lifetime. It may not come here, but he'll sustain you through it. For me, this is part of the cure towards those questions that I asked in that book. He brought me back to that place, and he began to let me go and take those pains and more of those memories and go run around and wash them in the water and go underwater and scream, and to find treasures are still out there waiting to be found, because I need to be reminded that there's good. And for me, I can see that in his creation. I struggle sometimes to see that in people. It's easier for me to see it in animals. It's easier for me to see it in situations that have nothing to do with any other person in the room or on the earth, but just me and a creature having a moment where I could see life. I could see life was beautiful, that life was interesting, that life was exotic and unique and deserved to be wondered and marveled at and explored and adored. I want to fall in love with nature again, and I do that. I take my hatred into the mountains. I take my hatred with me, and I lay it out there, and I bury it, and I throw it in the sea. And every time I want to come up for air, and I hold down a little longer because I might just find something really special, I do that, and I allow him to heal me in that place. I allow him to trade, to redeem it, to do the great exchange that he came here to do, to take my misery and give me peace. I allow him to do that there. That's what I do in nature. And he let me go out to Sanibel Island week after week after week after week and go explore the wonders of his treasure chest. I've always dreamed of that. My whole life when I was young, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to explore and look for fossils and archaeological things and treasure, and I wanted that. I had that sense of exploration, and I've always had a good gift of being able to find the best thing that's hiding there. I've always been good at finding. I'm a better seeker than I am necessarily a hider. I can find the treasures. The Father speaks to me powerfully when I'm out there, and he will direct me directly to one of the most unique things that could possibly be found in that area, because I believe it was destined for me, because it's his gift for me for such a time as that. Going out to Sanibel, I got to go out there sometimes with other people that had been through this, that were survivors, that were warriors of a world that most people still scream and yell and say doesn't exist. But I got to go out there, and when I was spending time with people and getting to see other people be healed on that island and being healed in the water and the waves and being at peace by the sea, I found this shell. For me, this was like the best shell I ever found in my life. It's a lightning whelk. It's one of the most incredible specimens I've ever seen. It's definitely the best one I've ever personally got to hold in my hands and look at and didn't have to go online and shop for. I found this. It was waiting for me. It was made for me. It was healing for me. It inspires me. It reminds me when I look at this, I know what it took to get me to that island. I know how miraculous it is that I got to go there and spend time with my daughter, teaching her how to swim in the ocean instead of a chemically chlorinated and piss-filled pool. I want to teach my child about real water, living water. I want her to experience the wonders of dangerous animals from a safe distance and a totally unsafe distance. I want my family to live vibrantly. I want other people to be inspired to live powerful, impactful, meaningful, not safe lives. I want those things. So when I see a seashell like this, because it reminds me that he is good and he's faithful and he could take me and bring me back to a place like that,
while I was wrestling with those questions, while I was still dealing with those things and seeing those things in my dreams, he could take them again and wash them again. He can do that anytime. Even if you think you didn't have to deal with that issue again, even if you didn't want to have to relive that moment, even if you didn't want to have to address the abuse that you went through, even if you just want to say it was just verbal. Some of you are still locked up in those moments, and some of you so desperately need to be freed, because once you do, it will set you on a course of such an abundant life. It will make your jaw drop. It will heal you. It will open up your hearing so you can hear again. The sound of his creation is wonderful. It's not horrible, and it needs to be remembered. You will remember taste and sound and sight and an abundance of goodness that is waiting for you. For me, that's the cure. For me, this is the cure. This was his cure. I got to go sit in a river and pray and ask God to bring manatees to me. And he did. I sat in a river that was so black and dark and mucky, I couldn't see a foot. I wasn't in the beautiful, picturesque springs of northern Florida. I was later. That did happen, and I got to see manatees from the surface. But to be in the water with them, I wanted to see what they were like. I wanted to know what they felt like if they brushed against you. And I sat motionless in the bottom of this river, not quite the bottom, almost the bottom, where our flippers were just touching the bottom, and I was just floating on the top. And I just held motionless and just prayed. I just prayed. I prayed to the one who created that creature, and I asked him if it was for me that he would bring one to me, because I went into that water angry. I went into that water climbing over trees. I climbed over trees to get into that water. I was not happy. I was having a hard day, and some of these days are really hard, and I try to take that with me and lay it out there. And I went into that water a bitter man, a frustrated man, a man who is tired of dealing with those things that I see sometimes that I wish I hadn't seen. I saw too much here. I heard too much. I've done too much sometimes in my life, and it's so costly, but I take that with me and I pray. And there was like literally one of the last, I feel like, cold days of winter where manatees will still congregate near springs, like actually good springs. When the water temperature dips so low, they'll go near springs that are warmer. And I had an opportunity to be in the water, and I prayed, and I kid you not, I feel this thing bite my flipper. And I screamed at the top of my lungs because it was terrifying. I thought I was going to be ready for it, but I wasn't. This thing kind of bit my flipper and moved my whole leg. And I felt like bristles, though, like hairs poking my leg. Hard, stiff hairs, like quills almost of a hairbrush. And then it came back and was pulling at my flipper. And I realized it's the manatee. Don't freak out. It's not an alligator. But it took me a moment, and I got to feel this creature as it played with my flippers. And I couldn't even see it. I couldn't see it. I just wanted to see it so badly, and I just needed to see it. And it just played with me, my feet, for a while, and then it slowly came up and leaned on me. And I gotta feel a manatee. I gotta see into its eyes. I gotta know what that was. And that was such a gift. That was such a gift. And this was the shell that I found right under that, right in the silty, nasty, gross river. I gotta remember that. So for me, that's what this is. For me, that's a reminder that he can still take it. And for me, that was how he healed me. That was how he cured me. And he's going to have to re-cure me and give me another dose of it again with regularity all the rest of my life, because that's what he has good in store for us. And I love that. I'm not afraid of his creation. I'm not afraid of people. I'm still wrestling through the evil of the earth and not wanting to always just go avenge it. I have to lay that down, but he gives me animals, he gives me people, he gives me conversations and memories to hold on to store up a new treasure in my mind, because I don't get to take anything with me out of this life except for I really believe the memories of it. The kingdom work we did in it, some of it's going to be straw and it's going to burn up and be worthless, but some of it will be good jewels that will last forever, and they'll be a worthy inheritance for me. But I want good memories. I want my daughter to have good memories. I want you to have good memories. I want you to experience the wonders of what he has in store for you. I could talk all day long about how these birds of prey have healed me. I could talk all day long about how people with these tools healed me. I could talk all day long about how this healed me. Seriously, chopping my way through the worst swamps ever, so I could go find fossils in rivers and springs that were so clear I could see the fossils sitting there. My dream. Since I was 8 years old, my whole life I've waited for that one moment to happen. I've wanted so badly to find fossils, and the first spring stream in Florida I ever went into had them in abundance, like just lying around abundance. Miracles. These are the things that he uses to heal me. I don't know what he's going to use to heal you, but some of you, this will also still heal you, and you should learn to bear it up appropriately again. I love you guys. I appreciate your sincerity and your willingness to come along with me on this journey, because the way of the blade for me is not just the tools, it's the torment, and it's the genuine beauty and relief that comes because of what those tools can provide you. I hope you be vigilant. Be safe. By that, I mean go live dangerously every day of your life with absolute certainty. Make a good decision today that changes the people's lives around you for the better, or make your life a whole lot worse because you're sacrificing all the worthless things in it for something that's wonderful and worthy of eternal praise. I love you.